Elves-and-More was created to help underprivileged children stay in school and out of trouble. But like every charity, a personal story led to a public mission. In 2000, I went through a divorce I didn't want. As Christmas approached, I was filled with dread. And on the way to the airport, I recalled another Christmas from my childhood. That year was 1960 when my father died. He left behind a young wife and 3 small boys. When Christmas time came around, my mother said, "We're all feeling really sad right now, but there are people who are much worse off than we are. Why don't we give Christmas away this year?" And we did. On Christmas Eve, in the dark of night, we got into the car with gifts, and we went to the home of a family of 5 children whose father had just died, leaving that family almost destitute. We slipped out of the car, piled the gifts on the porch, and then we left very quietly. No one knew we had come, no one knew we'd gone. 40 years later, that memory came to mind, and I adopted 55 children for Christmas. Now, I'd been working for 10 years in developing countries, so I'd seen a lot of poverty. But when I went into these neighborhoods, I was shocked at the conditions in which these children were living. This was America. Our children weren't supposed to be living like this. I resolved to do something about it. A couple of years later, I decided to provide one good Christmas for every underprivileged child in Houston. At the time, that was 250,000 kids, but that number's now a lot larger. I started with gifts for 1,000 children. It was a mix of toys and clothing and electronics and other gifts suitable for everything from infants to middle teens. But in the mix were 385 bikes, even though bicycles were not the centerpiece of the program. They were just another gift. On that delivery in 2002, with a few volunteers, we had 7 stops: a trailer park, a couple of apartment complexes, and several low-income neighborhoods. Before giving out the gifts, we had to decide whether to let the children pick a box or a bike or do it some other way. We decided that if we gave the children a choice, many of those would select bicycles, and that would mean that the children in the early neighborhoods would get all the bikes and the later neighborhoods would get none. And we didn't want that to happen. We wanted bikes across all of those. So we came up with a simple solution. Take a bucket, fill it with 2 colors of marbles, have each child reach into the bucket, and without seeing the marbles, and if they came out with a green, they got a box of gift. If they came out with a blue, they got a bike. Now, our first stop was a trailer park, and about 150 kids lined up to pick their marbles. And I happened to be at the front of the line so I could see the faces, and within 5 minutes, every child in that entire line knew that a blue meant a bike. As each child got his or her marbles, those who got a green marble would simply smile. It was like, I'm happy. But those who got a blue marble would yell out, "I got a bike, I got a bike, I got a bike!" And the reaction was doubly important because we were spending a lot more money on the gifts in the gift boxes than we were spending on the bikes. So I turned to Shane. He was one of the key volunteers who worked with these children. Why was a bicycle more important than more expensive gifts? Now, I knew that a bike was a prize, but it seemed to be a bigger prize in these poor neighborhoods. Shane looked at me and the answer was simple. These children live their lives on foot. The only place they can go is where they can walk, and a bike lets them go to more places. I spent the next several months thinking about that, and I asked a simple question. For children living on foot in poor neighborhoods, who are their mentors when they're not in school? For me, the answer was very troubling, for I imagined that it included people like gang members and drug dealers and ex-convicts. These children needed suitable mentors to help their parents who were working long hours and not available after school. While I didn't have the evidence, I knew that the absence of good mentors must be a key contributor to the rate of dropouts and the rate of crime in poor neighborhoods. I quickly learned that though they're few in number, there are some really good mentors in poor neighborhoods. They include coaches and counselors and others who run after-school programs. The problem was and is that mentors are often in one place while the children are in another, and it's usually too far for them to walk to get to them. Mentors can be the vital link in keeping kids in school and out of trouble. In most sports programs, for example, a child cannot participate in games if he isn't getting passing grades. Coaches motivate kids to work hard and to get passing grades. And with more time at practice, children have less idle time to hang out with the wrong crowd and get in trouble. That's how the Christmas program became a bike program. Bicycles could become pivotal levers to help at-risk kids realize better lives. For several years, we simply picked neighborhoods, and we drove into them with volunteers and trucks filled with bikes. We arrived unannounced. It was a surprise. We started honking our horn until the kids came out. No one knew we were coming. Every child that showed up got a bike. In some neighborhoods, we handed out as many as 5,000 bikes in one place. In fact, in one, we handed out 12,000. We aimed to saturate the entire neighborhood so that every child got a bike, and they also got to keep them because the risk of a bike being stolen was greatly reduced if everybody in the neighborhood had one. But soon we discovered that our method of delivery wasn't the best. Some of the children who lived in the neighborhoods never knew we had come until we were gone, and they didn't get any bikes. But other children in different neighborhoods flew into the neighborhood, and they got bikes and they took them back to their homes. To improve our delivery approach, we decided to team up with the schools. Working with teachers, we handed out vouchers and then delivered bikes to the kids at their individual schools. It was a very orderly process, far less chaotic than a surprise delivery. But still, we didn't require the students to do anything to get those bikes, and that troubled some of our supporters. Early on, some donors had urged me to require that children earn their bikes. They didn't like the idea of a handout. Now, I resisted that idea for years. I believed that any litmus test would result in all the bikes going to the students who made the A's and the B's. I feared that none of the bikes would go to the students who were making D's and F's. Now, I always thought and said and still believe that if my kid is the F student, what's going to happen to him? The A and the B students are probably going to do all right in their lives. The F student is going to be the one who ends up selling or using drugs or spending time in prison. To me, an F student is not necessarily a bad kid at all. That's usually a child who's on the wrong end of a set of bad circumstances. They're the ones who have a single parent in their house. They're the ones who suffer abuse. They're the ones in extreme poverty. They've got malnourishment, and nobody really cares about them. Then, one day, our board of directors decided to reevaluate our approach and our effectiveness. That resulted in a fundamental change to our program. We decided to reorient the program from a Christmas program into an education program with a purpose. We strengthened our ties to the schools, the principals, and the teachers. Working with educators, we found a formula for an earn-a-bike contract that would work for every student, including those who made A's and those that made F's in class. Under this approach, teachers would set one goal for each child. For some, that might mean getting a better grade in math or science or reading, but for others, it might be a behavioral goal, such as staying out of the principal's office. The key, however, was that the goal had to do two things. First, it had to be meaningful for that student's academic success, and second, it had to be attainable with effort. This approach let an F student earn a bike by raising a score of 40 to a score of 50. It's still a failing grade, but it's a meaningful gain for that student. A top student, on the other hand, might be making 90 in class, but only have to get to 92 to get a bike. Good students and poor students had an equal chance to earn a bike. Now, this proved to be a very powerful change in the direction of Elves-and-More. Students loved the program because they got a tangible reward, a bike. The teachers loved the program because it gave them a carrot and a stick in their class to get the students to perform better. And donors loved it because a bike was no longer a handout, it became a hand up. Our Earn-A-Bike contracts were delivering the right results, and everyone in the program was very pleased with them. The problem we faced, however, was that donor funds were constrained by economic circumstances, and we had an inability to grow the support base. With limited resources, we had to find a way to deliver even more results with fewer dollars. Our research was beginning to suggest that the single most important school subject was not math or science, but reading. The old saying that reading is fundamental really is true. Our children spend the first years of their lives learning to read. They spend the rest of their lives reading to learn. If they can't read, they can't succeed. It's that simple. Using grant funds provided by Humana, we conducted a pilot program in reading. Not surprisingly, the Earn-A-Bike contract worked just as well or even better with reading students. In one study group, students reading 94 words a minute improved by 47 words per minute, and on average, students continued to improve by at least one letter grade. However, because reading is taught to younger children, those from kindergarten through the third grade, we had to shift our program to their needs. Now, these children, unlike their older brothers and sisters, are too young to ride their bikes out of their neighborhoods and attend after-school programs. So the secondary mentoring benefits are not available to them. Our board believed, though, that the benefits of getting children to read better at the start of their educations far outweigh the secondary benefits of mentoring. As a result, we're now giving more than 80% of our bikes to children who participate in reading programs. Elves-and-More is currently buying bicycles to serve as incentives under Earn-A-Bike contracts for students in at-risk schools. More than 80% of those bikes are dedicated to students who are meeting their goals in reading programs. Currently, the program is constrained by donations, which are only adequate to fund 10,000 bicycles a year. We estimate that there are 25,000 to 30,000 children from kindergarten through third grade who are learning to read in the Houston area. There's an even larger group of older students who are not reading at grade level. There are still more children struggling in other subjects, particularly math and science, and our resources are inadequate to support them at this time. Our challenge, then, is to find a way to increase donations, first to serve the youngest reading students in greater numbers, and then to resume helping students in later grades and in other subjects. If money was available, we could buy, build, and deliver up to 50,000 bicycles each year. We know we can recruit the volunteers, and we know that the need is that great. In an effort to improve our funding levels, we're continually striving to improve the effectiveness of our program in the schools and to produce rock-solid metrics to document the academic gains we're delivering. Toward that end, we've dedicated a volunteer at each school to manage the on-site record keeping, as well as to ensure that the results are accurately compiled and summarized. Within the charity itself, I've asked another board member to take the leadership role and inject fresh thinking into our fundraising efforts, starting with the immediate growth of our board of directors. The single most important leverage point is fundraising. In past years, our funding was derived primarily from individuals, with limited funding by corporations and foundations. In recent years, however, those two groups have become a growing part of the fundraising mix. Companies and foundations demand solid metrics, so for years we've been devoting more attention to compiling those. Now, this is not a matter of doing more work within Elves-and-More. It's a matter of getting the principals and the teachers to do their jobs better within the schools. We've learned not to leave it up to them, but instead to provide active involvement and oversight on our end, from the start of the semester to the end of it. We're blessed with an abundance of volunteers. Right now, we have more than 12,000 volunteers in our database. With very little effort, we could probably double that number. Until we have more funding, we do not need that many volunteers. And to prevent having more volunteers than we need, several years ago we implemented a fee for volunteering. Even so, the volunteer numbers are growing much faster than the number of bikes we can buy. Elves-and-More is successful for several reasons. The public has a visceral understanding that a bicycle is important to an at-risk child. Our donors appreciate that our Earn a Bike contracts require children to get better grades in school for receiving a bike. Our results demonstrate that bicycles actually drive academic achievement, which is a worthwhile goal for donors and for educators. We have a long-standing and effective partnership with the independent school districts in our area. We are a volunteer-driven organization with a large and growing base of volunteers, currently numbering more than 12,000 people. Our program is simple to understand. A person can make a donation to buy a bike, come down to the bike build and build that bike, and then go out to the school and give that bike to a deserving child. There are very few charities that allow one to see the entire process from beginning to end. We have a core team of approximately 50 volunteers who've managed our public volunteers for years. We have a board whose members not only support the charity financially, but also encourage us to continually re-examine our program to make it more effective. We are quick to change whenever we discover a better way. We measure our success based upon the improvements in academic scores of the children receiving bicycles under their Earn a Bike contracts with their teachers. To realize the greatest success, we need the maximum number of eligible students to actually sign Earn a Bike contracts, and for the maximum number of those to actually achieve their goals. We need highly effective data gathering methods to ensure that the performance objectives set for the students are appropriate and attainable with effort. We need similarly effective data measuring actual performance by the students in reaching their goals. Finally, we measure our own effectiveness as an organization in the fundraising dollars that support the program. Many people assume that our bicycles are donated by the bicycle makers, when in fact, we purchase them using donor funds. Some people assume we have a large staff to manage the program. In fact, we manage the program with just an executive director and 3 part-time staff to handle accounting, website, and clerical duties. We are otherwise an all-volunteer organization with exceptionally low overhead. Because we began as a Christmas program, many in the public still think of us as Santa with elves, but we're actually an education program that uses bicycles as the incentives to improve academic performance. We've even considered changing our name, but with considerable brand equity in the name, we're very cautious about doing that. Elves-and-More is the largest bicycle program in the world. It promotes academic achievement as well as fitness and health. To date, the program has distributed well over 100,000 new bicycles to underprivileged children. As a volunteer-driven organization, the charity has established teams and processes to manage more than 10,000 volunteers, many of whom are children. Because of our efforts to promote education under Earn a Bike contracts between students and their teachers, we have developed close relationships with school administrators in a number of independent school districts. Increasingly, the charity has strengthened ties with corporations and foundations by demonstrating measurable impacts on educational performance of the children receiving the bicycles we buy, build, and deliver. Elves-and-More has evolved from being a simple Christmas program for kids into an organization driving academic achievement, especially through our reading program. While our legacy has created a powerful base of volunteers, in some ways it's limited the charity's donor appeal. Although that's changing as people discover our results in the schools. Building and maintaining an appropriately sized and financially comfortable board of directors has proven challenging. While recruiting directors is not too difficult, providing a challenging environment for those directors is harder. Few decisions demand board involvement, even though those decisions are very important. Usually the key decision for the year is how many bikes to order. Yet from time to time, we change directions, and those changes are vetted fully within the board. The single most important role of any charity director is fundraising. Yet, like other charities, our directors are reluctant to call upon others for financial support. Finding and retaining directors who are capable of providing support directly is important. Finding those who can become effective community ambassadors is considerably more difficult. With a significant increase in annual funding, we would first increase the size of the Earn a Bike program. Initially, we would dedicate those bikes to reading programs for children from kindergarten through third grade, where reading is first taught. We believe that is the point of greatest leverage in education. If additional financial support were available, we would increase the reading program to at least 25,000 students per year, and then focus on other subjects such as math and science, especially for those kids from the 4th grade through the 9th grades. Our past experience with these older students has proven that our Earn a Bike contracts work very well for them too. The maximum size of the bicycle program in Greater Houston is probably no more than 50,000 students per year. We are confident that we could recruit sufficient volunteers to serve that many children. We are also confident that we could secure adequate space for the bike build and arrange enough trucks to deliver those bikes to children in their schools. The only constraint is money to buy the bikes. Finally, if resources were adequate, we would devote a small portion of those funds to a long-term study of the impact of the program on students. This would first include assessments of educational outcomes for students who begin in reading programs under the Earn a Bike contracts, and then progress to students who earn their bikes in other subjects. The goal of this kind of study would be to measure outcomes, especially dropout rates, something we cannot now do because we do not track individual students. In addition, to date, we have conducted no formal studies of the impact of bicycles on children's participation in after-school programs or in their improvements in fitness and health. Those studies over a long period would help to demonstrate what we already know to be true. That hard evidence would foster fundraising among new support groups. Elves-and-More's mission is already very clear: to help children stay in school and out of trouble. We're not seeking to expand the scope of our work, as we believe that would dilute our focus. But if we had substantially more resources than would be necessary to operate an Earn a Bike program of 50,000 students each year, our approaches and methods would potentially enable us to do some other things. We could probably deliver more support and encouragement to students by using incentives other than bicycles. In addition, with some effort, we could probably help bridge the gap between people who are willing to become mentors and the children in need of mentors. In particular, positive male role models are in very short supply. In our ongoing efforts, we're already beginning to support these mentoring activities by connecting specific companies with specific schools. There are significant differences in the quality of leadership among schools. One way to improve the system's overall effectiveness is to help foster collaborations between the business community and the school principals. We could probably play a role in identifying the areas of need within the schools and then help recruit and focus external support from the business community.